Hello everybody, welcome back to another Woodworking Wisdom here at our Axminster HQ. Something a little bit different today. We are going to be making a hedgehog box. Great time of year to be setting up ready for the hedgehogs. This can go and sit in your garden somewhere and allow it to kind of mature a little bit in the garden before these hedgehogs want to start gathering their leaves up and getting ready for the winter for hibernation. So a great time of year to make one of these little hedgehog boxes. I've made this in a plywood, so we've marked out a panel of ply. We've got an old desktop that I found. What we want as materials is something that's not been treated or stained or varnished, anything like that. You know, the temptation is that this is going outside to put a varnish over it. We want to leave it untreated, and this will kind of slowly deteriorate over time, but it's, you know, you need to make it friendly for the kind of nature and the bugs that are going to want to go in there and things like that. Usually draped with a tarpaulin or some sort of plastic sheeting over the top. We're going to use an extractor bag to kind of waterproof this, and it's usually buried with leaves or log piles or stuff like that. So it's going to have a bit of natural protection and also an interface of some sort of plastic sheeting over the top of this one. Like I say, making it in ply. And I've managed to kind of reuse an old desktop. And we're going to be cutting that on the table saw. So we're going to be looking at the table saw. We're going to be making a little cut on the bandsaw. We're also going to be using the pillar drill, and then the rest is just kind of screwed together once we've got all our components. So a nice little easy project. Of course, you could make this out of planks of wood. You could use a handsaw to cut these to size and to length. We're just going to be go through the machinery today, give you some hints and tips on kind of setup and fences, things like that, about setting the depth on the pillar drill. So there's a few little hints and tips along the way, but of course you could use those hand tools, use your handsaw, and use different materials. Quite often those kind of outdoor woods that work well outdoor are your cedars, your western red and things like that here in the UK. But I'm highly allergic to those, so we've had to look at something as a kind of alternative. So first things first, we'll get our sheet out that we've marked up, and we're going to set up on the table saw and make just a few cuts ready for us to start drilling and cutting on the bandsaw. So we'll see you in a moment. Okay, so we're all set up on the table saw here. I need to cut my front, back panels and the lid. I've laid it out on the board so we could get as much kind of as we could out of the piece of timber that we got. You can see this is an old bench top or something like that, an old top of someone's desk. So we're reusing the materials, we're not wasting it, and I've tried to get as much out of the board as we can, so there's very little waste. We've got this little section down on the bottom here, but we are going to keep hold of that and we'll use that for the feet to kind of pull the or sit on the bottom of the box, and that's going to kind of lift it off the ground, so we won't waste that bit. Now there's a couple ways you could do this to set your sizes. I'm going to use the rip fence as a stop. A couple of important things we need to observe before we make that cut though, so I'll tell you that before we get into it. So I'm using the rip fence as a stop, but you could measure off of our little stop on the crosscut fence, or you could just offer the board up, eyeball it down the side of that line, and then kind of cut from there. You do want to be coming off of one of these fences. That's what's going to keep everything nice and square. Okay, so remember we were saying I'm going to use the rip fence as a stop. Now our edge of our board is parallel to the end of the rip fence there, and if we go to another camera, you can see that the board is not yet anywhere near that blade. Okay, That's really important that this one stops before the blade. Otherwise, when we're pushing this through and the cross-cut fence is putting that forwards pressure on, if it binds on that rip fence, it can twist the board, and that's going to pinch on the blade. So you need to be really careful if you're using the rip fence as a stop, that it's behind the blade or in front of the blade as you're kind of looking at the machine. Okay. So first panel is 310 millimeters wide. So I've set my rip fence at 310. This is all movable, but just on the side here we've got a little scale which is very accurate. We're going to lock that rip fence off, and then when our board comes up against that, we know we've got our 310 wide. Okay, good. So minimum kind of PPE is a pair of goggles. You may want to use ear defenders as well. Quite a loud machine, but we're only making a few cuts on this one. I'm going to hit the extractor. We need to just double check that we're nice and tight up against the cross-cut fence here, and that we've pushed our board right the way across to our rip fence. Okay, which we're using as a stop. It's not really a guide. This is the one that's guiding the board through at 90 degrees. So we can turn the saw on. This board is not perfectly flat and straight. So I've brought the piece that I was handling back away from the blade. We don't want it sat on the blade where it could potentially scorch. And I don't know if you noticed that our rip fence is back here. Can we see on a different camera? That's great. So there's a gap here between our piece that we've cut, our keeping piece, and the rip fence here. If I just lift it, hopefully you can see that that is in front of that one. So that's our board cut. Really nice finish on the back side of that. We've got very little breakout. If you do, just a bit of abrasive, and that's going to knock off all those little splinters, potential splinters. So that's our front panel. We just need to do one more cut on that one, so I'll pop that to one side on the bench. Remember, if you're laying out this on our board, we need a bit of space for the blade, the curve or the width of the blade. So I've just offset our next one just a few millimeters. So we need to just trim that area off, and then we can reset on a slightly different size panel, and we can push that through and cut that one. So for this one, I'm just literally eyeballing down that line that I've drawn, bringing it just up close to that tooth. Turn the saw on again. Again, pulling pressure back on our cross-cut fence, and I'm just going to explore where this cut is going to sit. That looks good, it's hitting our line, so I can just push that through. And just trim that little slither off. It's kind of thrown it forward, so we'll just remove that one. Now we can turn our saw off, reset that rip fence which we're using as a stop, and this time we are going for 270, so 270 mil or 27 centimeters. So just removing any kind of debris on the surface there. We can turn the saw back on, bring our sheet up too. Again, bringing that pressure back onto our cross-cut fence. and we're not pushing this through too fast. A nice kind of slow speed, give the blade time to cut, and then that's going to reduce all that breakout as well. So pull that one back, machine turns off, and just wait for that blade to stop before you remove any of these panels. Blade stopped now, so we're safe to just go in and fish this one out. That's our back panel. Again, I'm just going to eyeball this one. We've got a bit of waste up there, so we can always adjust it as we make this cut. Of course, you could measure this out and use your stop on the end of this cross-cut fence. I'm just doing this for speed. And so keeping an eye on where that cut's going. And actually I've overshot this line, so that's going to give me a good chance to line that up. And we need to just come this way a touch, so I'm knocking the board. And we're pretty close there. One more little knock. Push that cut right the way through and bring our board back. Okay, good stuff. So we've just got one more cut to do now. We want to cut along this line. I haven't put my measurement there, so I'm just going to go back to my rule, because we're going to cut this one using the rip fence. So it's 440 millimeters across. Just going to make a little note of that down the bottom here, and then I can use that rip fence. So just going to adjust the rip fence. Let's come on to that other camera there. Great, thank you. So I'm going to put the rip fence right the way across to the back of the blade. We can lock that one back off. Remove that piece of waste. And what did we say? 440. So we're going to just slide our rip fence along to our 440 and then lock that off. And then if we bring our board across, that should line up with our pencil line there. It's looking pretty good. I just want to double check on the other end there, because like I say, this board wasn't square or flat edged, so it might just be that we need to have a little tinker and just double make sure that things are going to work. Careful of your teeth if you're ever measuring with a steel rule. They are tungsten tip tooth, so we don't want to swing that rule around and chip the blade or tooth potentially. And I think we're good there. So now we're using our rip fence, so we just need to push this right the way through, past the cut, past that blade. So I'm going to need my push stick. We don't want to lean too far across, and it might be that we need to hold this board down. It's not entirely flat, so a push stick is going to be really useful at this point. So I'm going to start off just by hand. Have my hand on the top here. We're pushing against this rip fence now. Being aware where your hands are the whole time. Use your push stick right at the end there. And just keep pushing it through past the blade and turn the machine off. Wait for that blade to completely stop, before retrieving your board. And there we go. We've got our. This is our lid. This is the biggest panel on the on our Hedgehog box. But yeah, there's our panel. So that's a couple of little bits on the table saw. There are a couple sections we need to cut out, a couple of squares for access for these hedgehogs. That's on the front board, and then we've got a dividing board as well, which we cut earlier. So yeah, I think we're going to set up on the bandsaw. So let's go over to the bandsaw, get that set up. Really easy, couple of cuts on there. And again, you could always do this with your handsaw. Hi everyone, so we've put the box roughly together. Always a good idea to do this at this stage. Once you've cut out your kind of panels, I guess, for whatever means, your table saw, your bandsaw, however you've cut them out, always good to have a good, put it together and see if it's going to fit. This way you're going to avoid any kind of unpleasant mistakes or surprises. If certain things don't fit or you need to make something a bit bigger, always a good idea to do this now. And something I just wanted to show you that didn't occur to me earlier, if we go onto our little box here, we need to cut on our front panel a little entrance hole. And I hadn't considered the thickness of the timber around here. So I've just enlarged that a little bit. And that's why it's always a good idea to have a little kind of test put together. A couple of bits you haven't seen me machine, but really easy to do so, are these kind of dividing or the end panels. We've got 3 of these, all the same size and shape. We've got a square edge here. This is 290mm high on the kind of long end, 250 on here, and you literally just join the dots across. The width of the board's 400 mil. Okay, good. So when this goes together, this box, as we've seen before, we're going to have the entry hole right on that bottom right hand corner, and then on this one we need to cut a little area out. So what we're doing is forming like a little tunnel, if you will. So he's going to go in through our hole here, down the little tunnel, and then around this corner a little 90 degrees, and that's going to protect it from kind of natural predators. So things like cats, foxes, badgers could all pose a threat to our little hedgehog. So what we're doing is narrowing down the kind of entry hole, and then tucking the main chamber of this box around the corner so nothing can get its little paws down here and attack our hedgehogs. So it's nice and safe. We need to keep our hedgehogs safe. So cutting this out on the bandsaw, really easy to work with. We've got our fence just sat there. We need to cut this area out, which I've marked off. This here is 13 centimeters, so 130 mil. That's the kind of recommended size for these apertures for the hedgehogs to get in. So I'm just going to need to pop the extraction on just over on the corner there. Sorry a moment. Okay, thank you. So extraction, just need to open my blast gate there. That's open, so that's good. Just have a quick look round. We'll shut the one on the table saw that we were using earlier. That's going to improve the suction on our bandsaw. So backing the project away from the blade a little. We can put that there. Now, we've not quite got enough room. We could change the fence over, but actually if we flip the board, we've already measured that distance there, so these two cuts should meet. just on that little corner. Come back. Oh, and it's just popped out. So we've cut that one. Not quite the same finish as we got off of the table saw with that lovely fine tooth blade. So we get a little bit of breakout on the bandsaw. Of course, if there's youngsters you're doing this with, there's a potential there for splinters and things. A little bit of abrasive just across the end there, and that's going to knock that straight off. It's a bit clogged, that bit of abrasive, but it's still done a great job. We've just knocked off that those kind of fibres. All right, good. So that's our door there, allowing for this this spacing here. That's our 13mm on this area. Now we need to cut this panel. We need to cut that little square off there, and I've marked this up on both sides of the board. Again, nice and easy on the bandsaw, because we've got a sloping roof on our hedgehog box. So where we've got an angle running across here, that's not going to sit well on the fence. So I've marked this square up on both sides. Just offer the piece up to, and it's coming up to our pencil line. And I tend to cut on the waist side of the pencil line if I can. With the old adage, you can always take a bit more off, but you can't put it back on. Good. So that bit of waste is happy, just sat there, wait for the bandsaw to stop, and then we can remove our waste. Good, so kept everything nice and safe. We've cut our little aperture for the kind of corridor for our hedgehog to wander through. Good. So in a minute we'll get this all laid out properly. We've got our front panel there. We've got this little side one which is going to come up flush to the side of that little doorway. And then we've created a little corridor for our hedgehogs. Good. So next job is to, we need to put some drill holes in this. We need to screw the whole thing together. And I'm going to do that using the pillar drill. So we're going to drill some holes to accept the screws, and also countersink them, make this all nice and tidy. And those drill holes are actually we're going to use them as almost a drill guide to drill into the next panel by hand. So we'll show you how that goes. In just a moment we're going to set up on the bench. Okay, so we've set up on the bench here. We're next to the pillar drill, which we're going to use in a moment. Again, it's a good idea just to lay things out, how they're going to kind of fit together. And we can decide where we need to drill our holes to put our screws in. Okay, and the spacing from the edge here, because we want the screws to kind of come in on the in the middle of these boards. We've measured the width of the board, and we'll divide that by 2. So this is a 19mm ply, so it's going to be quite a heavy box. So half of 19 is 8. So that's what we're going to set on the pillar drill in a moment. A good idea just to lay it out though, because sometimes pieces aren't, you might get something upside down, or it's easy to do with these kind of these ends and the divider. We need to make sure that things are going to be in place before we drill our holes, and give ourselves an idea of where we want to drill them in. And it's not crucial. I'm literally going to put a line here, or a dot, and another one here. And again, I'm not too fussed about where I'm placing that. When we set it on the pillar drill in a moment, that fence is going to give us our spacing. It's really just an idea of where we want to drill in. So we've got 2 here. We're going to have 3 down here, so we're going to have 1 that's going to go in that bottom bit. Again, not too fussed because that distance will be set on the pillar drill. I think we want one just above our little alcove there, our doorway, and then with the top of this divider I'm just going to come across and just pop one there, and we'll do that right the way around the box. Where you want your fixings, I would go from the front inwards, and then from the base we're going to go up in. So yeah, we're just going to go around and plot all the places where we're going to screw or attach our panels together. So the front one's nearly done. Just do a couple more, so we're going to go 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, and 1 roughly in the middle. Again, that spacing's not critical. And yeah, we'll just whiz through this and see you on the pillar drill. So on our pillar drill, we are going to just measure from the fence. Remember, we want that 8mm in from the edge of the board. So we can adjust our fence here. This is the little UJK fence. It's got the extraction on it as well, which is a really useful thing. I'm just going to tap one side. This doesn't have to run flat and parallel. What I'm looking for is using this lip and spur drill to set this just 8mm in from the edge of this. Okay, then we can lock that one off, and now we know every time we drill into our board, we've got that 8mm offset from the fence, which is half of the thickness of the board that we're attaching it to. Hopefully that all makes sense. Now I've set the depth of this one as well, so we'll go right the way through our boards, and we're gonna go just into a little bit of sacrificial ply I've just popped in underneath. So this will stop some of the breakout, so we can drill right the way through our board. We're not going to drill into our table, but we'll clear through the board that we want to drill and just slightly into this one, and that's going to help stop the breakout. Good. So goggles on, and we can drill our holes. We are going to countersink these as well, but for now we're just going to drill those ones that have the spacings, and if we've got some that are in the middle of our box, we just need to reset the fence and we can drill those by hand. Good. So away we go, lots of holes to drill now, and like I say, we're just aiming for that dot. The spacing we have is actually done by the fence, so it takes the guesswork out. Okay. another little one on the corner. We can now swap that drill bit out for a countersink. We're going to countersink all of those holes. Actually, before we do that, let's cut those holes that won't have that didn't have the 8mm spacing around the edge. So we'll drill those. We'll swap out for the countersink, and then we'll go around all those as well. So just taking out the drill bit there, opening up the drill chuck a little so we can fit our countersink in. This is one of the big snail cutting countersinks. Really nice to use this one. Can sometimes tear a little bit on these kind of plies, especially if there's a slight void in underneath or anything like that. Now we need to just reset the depth. So actually, we're not too far off. I'm going to give that a little test as is. Of course, we're not going right the way through this time. We're literally just trimming these so that the screw head will sit down flush with the board. It should kind of self-center once it finds the hole. Have a little look. I think perhaps we need to come in just a little bit lower with that, so I'm resetting the lock nuts just on the side of the pillar drill here. Again, we'll take a little test cut. That's good. There's a little bit of a flare up like we were saying before, but again, we can just whiz around all these holes that we drilled and make sure we've got that nice little countersink for the screw heads. So like I say, kind of aim for the hole. It should, that conical nose on this one should kind of self-center. So it can be a nice little quick job. Okay, so we've got all our holes drilled and countersunk. Like we were saying before, you can get a little bit of a flare up on the fibres of a board like this, but just something, a coarse abrasive. I'm just using what we've got hanging around here. I'm just going to whiz off the worst of those. Sometimes the longer fibres will get pulled back down with a screw, so I'm not being too fussy about it. Again, we're not going to have the hedgehog complaining about it, and we're not going for fine, cabinet making or anything here. We're just doing a nice little rough and ready box that our hedgehogs are really going to appreciate. Good. So now it's just a matter of screwing this box together. We've got a couple of little struts to put on the lid so it fits on, and then some feet to go in underneath. Okay, so we've done all of our drilling and the countersink. Now we're going to just attach the pieces together. I'm going to put the two sides on first and then the back, and then we've still got access to everything in the middle. I'm using a little 10.8 drill, a little Bosch 10.8, and also the screws that we're going to be using. These are 40mm by 3.5, and they are stainless steel, so they're not going to rust and weather like a lot of the plated ones might do. So stainless steel screws, no expense spared for the little hedgehogs. And the way I'm going to hold this, I'm going to put the side panel, so this is one of our side panels. We need to make sure this is the right way round. So the front of the box has the longer edge, so the slope kind of goes backwards from the front. So I'm going to pop this in our bench vise, up flush to the bench, and just clamp that one on. And then in here we're fully PARFed up. We've got this lovely PARF bench with a T-track just installed on the side here, and that's allowing me to use one of these little hold down clamps, which is really useful. Got a really good strong hold on that piece of timber in that vertical position, so that's going to be really helpful. Just a little bit of a juggle around on the bench here. We've got quite a big panel to manoeuvre, so I'm just going to have a little whiz around, make sure that's not going to fall off the back. Get my meter rule out the way, pop that up on the pillow drill for a moment, and then we can use this just to line it corner to corner or edge to edge. I'm going to use the drill. This is a 2.5 drill bit, so actually it's smaller than the hole that we've drilled here. This is a kind of a clearance hole, so when the screw goes in, it's not going to bite so much on this top layer, but it's going to really pull in and grab well onto this board and the vertical. So I'm just going to use those little holes that we've already made as a little drill guide, and just drill some little pilots down into our board. Fast with the drill when drilling, so that's on its speed setting 2, and then our little 10.8 is on its speed setting 1 for screwing. And that will really pull the board too. Everything's nice and rigid holding it this way, and you'll notice that those screw heads are just sinking below the surface into our countersink. So we need to go around. We're going to turn this around, do the other side. We can't hold it like this for the next one because we've already got one side in. Right, so we can't turn this through 180 degrees because we've got this side panel on now. But what we can do is just undo our clamps. We can now swing. Oh, let me just make a little bit of room here. Come out that clamp. And remember, we want to screw in from that side now, so we need to just get our panel. We'll make sure that it's facing the right way around, so I'm just comparing it to the one at the bottom. Make sure we've got our angle going the same way, and that looks good. So we can lay that board up against the edge of the bench. We can bring our little box up too, potentially a little bit fiddly, but let's get that clamp in place. That's better. Just holding the weight of the project with my knee. We can grip on there, and then we can bring our hold down clamp there. And again, you could put dogs at the back here if you wanted to hold it in place. Again, we could use one of those little hold down clamps just along here, so we can bring our project together. And having these T-slots and the hold down clamps really easy to use. Okay, so back to our drill. We're doing our little pilot holes. That's good. We want our screws. And there we are. Really nice way to hold that project. Sometimes it's quite a fight to get everything in place. And having those kind of through holes and the smaller pilot hole is really pulling that panel onto this one. Good. That's all one piece now, so we can just move things out the way, have a look at what's next. Okay, so we've got, that's our front there. Remember the slope goes from back to front. I think I'm going to pop this front panel on before we put that dividing panel, so our little corridor, remember. So we'll put this panel on first, then we can put in our corridor. Yeah, nice and simple now. So just aligning the board up, and again we'll go through these little pilot holes and get everything ready to be screwed together. Let's get some dogs working for us at the back there. So we've got something to push against. Just a little pair of pups. That gives us a nice solid back to push against. Just teasing these boards in a little. So we're hitting on the screw that's come up past there, so I'm just going to pop one of these a little bit higher. Good. We can attach our front panel. Okay, now let's have a little bit of a think about what we want to do next. We want to screw this little divider in. That's going to go round slightly different. Sorry, that's going to go there. That's our base. So we've got our sloping roof. It's quite easy to put these the wrong way up. That one's going to go in there. Remember, we've marked those holes and drilled those holes in from underneath. We've still got feet to put in, so I would probably put the feet in at this point. I think for now we can put our back panel on, make sure we're happy with that, but let's get this piece in first. So I'm going to turn the box over so the open end, so we can see what's going on. We can put our little divider up through, and that's going to make everything a little bit more stable. And remember, it wants to come flush to this opening on the front here. I tend to knock these a little, just a little tap, and then we've got our line from before, which we did with the square, to help align into our box here. And the edge of that board is in line there. We can use our screw holes that we did on the pillar drill as our little pilot holes, and then we've got some screws to go in there. You feel it pull tight after each screw. It gives it a real nice solid feeling. That's good. Brilliant. So that's it. We've got our corridor here, so our hedgehog comes in here, it comes around the corner, and then he's got his main chamber at the back there to make his nest, or his or her nest. That's it really. Okay, let's come round to the back. I'm just kind of imagining myself putting these feet in. I think I've got good access there, so I can put this back panel on. We don't need to put the feet on first. Remember, we've got those little guide pups at the back there. They're just keeping or giving me something to kind of push against the, you know, use the pressure of the drill against our box. So this is the back. We need to drill our guide holes. Just using those ones we did on the pillar drill as our guide. These last two, just going to pop the box up on its back. We've got our screw there again. So let's come up a little bit higher with these ones. Okay. Good. And this board is just trying to kind of push its way out. So pop the screw in there, putting a little bit of pressure on with my thumb. And that pulled the board flush to the side. Good. A couple more screws just to secure the base. And that's our little box. We've got all the bits there we need. I think that's looking pretty cool. Obviously we've got pencil marks on here. We could just sand those back. Now next job, we need to get our little offcuts, and we need to put a couple of little struts on here so that this becomes a removable lid. They do recommend that you clean out the hedgehogs' houses once a year. So we've got a little lip on the side here which we can lift the lid off, and what I'm going to do is just can reach up on this side, make sure the overhang is similar, and find that corner edge and just scribe a little line with my pencil up in there. You could measure it, find center point and then measure it outwards. But like I say, this is quite a rough and ready little box. What I'm going to do is find the line that we scribed this side, measure that distance there. So we're about 40 mil in. And again, this doesn't want to be really tight. This is really just a way to secure it on top. So about 40 mil in. I'm just going to do a little line here. $40 mil here. And this is going to give me a rough marker as to where to put my battens. Okay, so I'm just going to whiz off to the bandsaw. We're going to use those offcuts just to cut a couple of little strips. and we're going to screw them onto the bottom of this lid. So we just cut off a little couple of strips here. These are going to form the little battens that sit under the lid that kind of help locate the lid when you're putting it on. A little bit rough off the bandsaw, or we get a little bit of breakout. And remember, on these types of ply, you don't want to get splinters off of this stuff. So just a quick whiz over with the abrasive. And we got rid of the worst of that. Remember, we just scribed a line in under here. We transferred that measurement across onto the top, and we're going to put a batten there. We use the straight edge because that's what's going to sit on the inside of the box here, and then these ones are going to sit there. And we need a little gap front and back. And remember, if you're using a certain length screw, like we were using the 40s before because we wanted it to bite right back into that panel. If we were to use that screw on here, it's going to go right the way through and come out the top of the lid, and you'll have a little, you know, a little spiky bit. So we're just going down a little bit with the length of the screw. So we've got something a little bit chunkier and a little bit shorter, and we know if we're screwing that in, it's going to bite into the material enough, but it's not going to break through and cause us any bother. So this time we're just going to make sure we're not screwing into our project. I'm just going to do one front and back. Just keeping in line with our little line here. Onto those shorter screws, and you could countersink these as well if you want, but this is all hidden in underneath. And they do a pretty good job of kind of self-countersinking. Anyway, these screws. Good. So again, just aligning that with that one. Again, we're not going to go right the way through, but it's a good idea to steer clear of the project a bit. So those are our little battens screwed on. Just going to flip that over, and that should just locate on top there. Good. So that's the basic build of our box. A really nice, easy, quick way to put together a box. Remember that divider is really important. That's going to keep our little hedgehog safe with that 90-degree on the back there, stopping any kind of paws or any little animals trying to get in there. This really needs to be raised off the ground a little bit, so you could screw some feet in each of the corners. That's going to raise it off the ground a bit, or you could just put a couple of flat bits of timber underneath. Again, it's really so that air can get in underneath and keep it a bit drier, and to stop it from kind of sucking the moisture out of the ground. What we'd do with this now is find a nice kind of shady, quiet spot for it, sheltered from the wind and things like that. Quite often people put them behind their sheds and workshops. But you know, if you've got a busy kind of loud workshop, it's probably not going to be suitable there. But behind a potting shed or something like that, where it's not going to get too interfered to, there's not a high you know, amount of traffic walking by. You want to put potentially a plastic sheet, so maybe a bit of tarpauling, or you know, we're going to use our extractor bags, the big plastic extractor bags. That's going to sit over the top, and probably you know, put some logs on top. You want to put a few leaves in there to get the hedgehogs going. They will start to gather their own bedding and stuff, but things like straw and leaves are a really good head start. And with all the logs and stuff around it, you know, you could potentially pyrography or something like that on there. Try and stay away from stains and varnishes. That's going to create quite a smell in there. Try and keep it as natural as possible and protect it using a plastic sheet with a bunch of logs and leaves on top, and that's also going to start encouraging the insect life there, so there'll be food and shelter for your hedgehogs. Well, thank you very much for joining us for another Woodworking Wisdom. Keep an eye out for more to come, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.